What if Hollywood's brightest stars weren't shining at all, just burning? The red carpets, the diamonds, and the perfect smiles looked eternal, but most of them were masks. Behind every flawless photograph was a secret carefully edited out of the frame. Vintage Hollywood was never built on truth. It was built on illusion. Every actor, every actress was a product, crafted, controlled, and owned by studios that decided what they could say, who they could love, and how they could live. The cameras captured beauty, but they never captured the pain it took to maintain it. In that world, honesty was dangerous. A single rumor could end a career. A single secret, if revealed, could destroy everything. So the stars learned to lie, not for fame, but for survival. Some hid their identities. Others hid their addictions, their children, or their sanity. And a few were erased completely, their real lives replaced with studio-approved fiction. These weren't stories of glamour, they were stories of endurance. Because in old Hollywood, perfection wasn't a privilege, it was a prison. Tonight, we pull back the curtain to see what those cameras refused to show. The fame, the fear, and the facades that built an empire of make-believe. And it all begins with a woman the world called pure grace. Audrey Hepburn, the ballerina who survived a war before she ever survived Hollywood. Before the world saw her as the embodiment of grace, Audrey Hepburn was just a young girl trying to survive. Long before the black dresses and the breakfast at Tiffany's, she lived through a nightmare most people couldn't imagine. Born in Belgium and raised in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation, her childhood was defined by hunger, fear, and silence. While the world would one day see her dancing across stages and film sets, her first performances weren't for fame. They were for survival. As a teenager, Audrey secretly carried messages for the Dutch resistance, slipping them inside her ballet shoes as she pretended to rehearse. Every step was a risk. Every dance was an act of quiet defiance. Food became so scarce that she resorted to eating tulip bulbs just to stay alive. Her once bright frame grew thin and frail, the very image of fragility. Yet the same fragility that later made her a symbol of elegance was born from suffering, not privilege. The world saw beauty, but Audrey knew pain. When Hollywood finally found her, they saw an angelic face in a soft, delicate voice, a perfect reflection of innocence. But behind that elegance was someone who had already witnessed the worst of humanity. She had seen neighbors disappear, children starve, and entire towns crumble. And when journalists later asked about those years, she would only say, "I have seen too much to ever want to speak of it again." Her grace wasn't a performance, it was protection. Her silence wasn't mystery, it was memory. Audrey Hepburn didn't act fragile. She simply carried herself with the calm of someone who had already survived everything. She became the face of perfection in a world built on illusion. But while Audrey's truth was buried in the shadows of war, another Hollywood star was hiding something that could have destroyed his entire career. Not a story of survival, but of forbidden love. Rock Hudson looked like the American dream. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly handsome. Everything 1950s Hollywood wanted its leading men to be. On screen, he was the charming bachelor who swept women off their feet, the picture of masculine perfection. But that image was carefully constructed. Behind the scenes, Rock Hudson was living a lie that wasn't his choice. It was his survival. In mid-century Hollywood, being gay wasn't just frowned upon, it was career suicide. Studios controlled everything, from what their stars wore to who they were seen with. Image was everything, and truth was the enemy of profit. Rumors about Rock's sexuality began to swirl, and that was all it took for his team to panic. The studio didn't see a man, they saw a brand at risk of collapsing. So, they created a story. In 1955, Rock married his secretary, Phyllis Gates. To the press, it looked like a whirlwind romance, a Hollywood fairy tale between the world's most eligible man and the woman who had captured his heart. In reality, it was damage control. The marriage was arranged, short-lived, and suffocating. It was never meant for love. It was meant to protect the illusion. For decades, Rock played his greatest role, not in a movie, but in life. He smiled at premieres, posed with female co-stars, and gave interviews that reinforced the lie. He was trapped in a performance that never ended. The world saw confidence and charm, but inside he lived with the fear of exposure. Every rumor, every whisper felt like a loaded weapon pointed at his career. In the final years of his life, that fear finally met the truth when Rock Hudson publicly revealed that he was dying of AIDS. It shocked the world, but it also set him free. He was no longer the Hollywood fantasy. He was human. His confession changed the conversation around AIDS forever, turning stigma into empathy and silence into awareness. Rock Hudson once said, "The hardest role I ever played was Rock Hudson." And he meant it, because in a world that worshipped lies, his real life was the one thing he was never allowed to play. The truth had finally come out, but for another star, truth wasn't something that could be spoken at all. She didn't fake who she was. She simply vanished before the world could ever ask. In the early 1950s, Jean Peters was the kind of actress studios dreamed about. She had the beauty, the talent, and the promise of a long, dazzling career. Critics called her the next big thing, and audiences adored her calm confidence on screen. But at the height of her fame, she vanished. No scandals, no headlines, just silence. Her disappearance began the day she married Howard Hughes, the reclusive billionaire whose mind was as powerful as it was unstable. Hughes wasn't just eccentric, he was obsessive. His paranoia ruled every part of his life, and soon, every part of hers. After their wedding, Jean broke her studio contract, walked away from Hollywood, and disappeared into his world of secrets and shadows. For the next 14 years, she lived behind the locked doors of Hughes' empire. Rarely seen, never interviewed, the world whispered about her. Some said she was being controlled, a prisoner inside his luxurious isolation. Others said she chose the quiet to escape the chaos of fame. The truth sat somewhere in between. When Hughes died, Jean finally resurfaced, but she didn't tell her story. She refused interviews and never spoke publicly about her marriage. "My life was never meant for the public," she told a reporter once. And that was all she said. In an industry built on exposure, she chose the opposite. Erasure. The studio called it love, but maybe it was something darker. Maybe Jean Peters didn't trade fame for comfort. Maybe she traded it for freedom. While Jean hid herself from the world, another woman was being forced to stay in it, polished, packaged, and poisoned by the very studio that made her a star. Judy Garland was never meant to live a normal childhood. While other kids were learning how to play, she was learning how to perform. By 13, she was signed to MGM, the biggest studio in the world, and handed her first script, her first diet plan, and her first pill. From that moment on, Judy Garland stopped being a person, she became a product. The studio executives adored her voice but hated her reflection. They told her she was too chubby, too plain, too human to be a leading lady. So they did what Hollywood always did. They changed her. They fed her amphetamines to keep her awake, barbiturates to make her sleep, and cruelty to keep her obedient. On the set of The Wizard of Oz, the movie that made her immortal, Judy was living through her own nightmare. She filmed musical numbers on bleeding feet, smiled through exhaustion, and hid behind a laugh that wasn't real. Whenever her energy dropped, someone would hand her another pill and say, "Be happy, Judy." So she smiled even when she was trembling. By 23, her body and mind were unraveling. She had already attempted to end her life once, but the studio didn't care. They only cared about her next performance. Every time she fell apart, they pieced her back together just enough to send her back on stage. Judy Garland didn't lose control. She was dismantled, bit by bit, film by film, year by year, until there was almost nothing left. She was a symbol of joy for millions, but behind every song was a scream no one wanted to hear. When she died at 47, alone in a London bathroom, Hollywood mourned her as a legend. But the truth was simpler and sadder. Judy Garland wasn't destroyed by fame. She was destroyed by the people who profited from it. And while Judy's light was taken from her, another star was about to discover that sometimes it wasn't fame that killed you, it was the color of your skin. Dorothy Dandridge had everything Hollywood claimed to love: beauty, talent, elegance. When she walked into a room, people noticed. When she spoke, they listened. And when she appeared on screen, she commanded the camera with grace and fire all at once. But in the 1950s, none of that could save her from the color of her skin. She made history as the first black woman ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. It should have been the moment that changed everything, but instead, it changed nothing. The same industry that praised her refused to let her in. Dorothy wasn't allowed to stay in the hotels she performed in. She couldn't swim in the pools she stood beside for photos. And when she kissed a white actor on screen, it became a national controversy. Hollywood loved to show her off, but never wanted to give her power. She fought for roles that showed her as a woman, not a stereotype. But every script that landed on her desk reminded her of the cage she was in. The same doors she opened for others were slammed in her face. But off-screen, she carried more than fame. She was a single mother caring for her disabled daughter, paying for round-the-clock medical care with nightclub performances when the film roles stopped coming. Each night she stood under the spotlight, smiling for a crowd that adored her image but ignored her pain. The pressure broke her down. The constant rejection, the financial struggles, and the loneliness chipped away at her spirit. At 42, Dorothy Dandridge was found dead in her apartment. The official cause was an accidental overdose, but those who knew her said it felt more like the world had simply stopped catching her when she fell. Dorothy didn't fall from grace. She was pushed. She was a pioneer who opened a door she never got to walk through, and in doing so, she revealed the truth about Hollywood's love. It was never unconditional. While Dorothy Dandridge fought to be seen, another woman fought to hide everything. The biggest role of her life wasn't on screen, but in keeping her secret buried forever. Loretta Young was Hollywood's picture of purity. Elegant, polite, and deeply religious, she became the kind of woman America admired, an actress who embodied faith in a city built on sin. Her beauty was angelic, her reputation spotless, and the studios made sure it stayed that way. But behind her polished smile was one of old Hollywood's most haunting secrets. In 1935, during the filming of The Call of the Wild, Loretta worked alongside Clark Gable, the king of the silver screen. Charming and reckless, their chemistry was undeniable, both on and off camera. But when Loretta discovered she was pregnant, the fairy tale turned into a scandal that could have ended her career overnight. She was unmarried Catholic and under contract. In that era, there was no forgiveness for a woman's mistake, especially one made with a man like Gable. To protect her image, Loretta disappeared from the public eye. When she returned months later, she claimed to have adopted a baby girl from an orphanage. That child was her own. She named her Judy Lewis, raised her in secrecy, and told no one, not even Judy herself, the truth. The father, Clark Gable, never publicly acknowledged his daughter. For years, the secret stayed buried. Judy grew up unaware, though the truth was written across her face. The same eyes, the same smile, the same unmistakable Gable features stared back at her in the mirror. It wasn't until she was an adult that Loretta finally confessed, trembling and tearful. "I did what I thought was right," she whispered, but the lie had already lived a lifetime. To the world, Loretta Young was a saint. To herself, she was a sinner begging for forgiveness. Her faith demanded silence. Her career demanded perfection. And between the two, there was no space left for truth. While Loretta spent her life hiding a secret she could never escape, another woman faced the opposite fate. She didn't hide from the system, she fought it, and Hollywood made sure she paid the price. Frances Farmer never fit the mold that Hollywood tried to force her into. She was brilliant, outspoken, and unwilling to smile on command. While other actresses bowed to studio pressure, Frances demanded respect, and that made her dangerous. In the 1930s and 40s, a woman with opinions wasn't seen as bold. She was labeled difficult. Frances wanted to make art, not marketing. She refused to play the docile sweetheart, refused to let executives control her image, and refused to hide her anger when she was treated unfairly. But Hollywood had a way of dealing with women who didn't obey. They didn't argue with them, they erased them. Her defiance became the excuse the studios needed. One night, after a public argument and a string of fabricated outbursts, Frances was arrested. The press called her unstable, the courts called her unfit, and the system sent her away to psychiatric institutions where her name, her rights, and her freedom were stripped away. She spent nearly a decade locked inside hospitals that claimed to heal her, but only broke her further. There were rumors of abuse, of electric shock treatments, and even of a lobotomy. Hollywood moved on without her, pretending she had never existed. For years, she was the ghost of her former self, living proof of what happened to anyone who challenged the machine. When she was finally released, Frances tried to rebuild a life from the ruins. She hosted a small local television show, wrote pieces of her story in fragments, and spoke with the kind of clarity that only comes from surviving the unimaginable. "I have been torn apart," she said once, "but I will not be ashamed." Frances Farmer was never truly broken. She was punished for refusing to play pretend. The industry that made her famous destroyed her, but it couldn't take her truth. Her legacy stands as a reminder of what happens when a voice refuses to stay quiet, no matter how hard the world tries to silence it. And when we look back at all of them, Audrey's silence, Rock's secret, Jean's disappearance, Judy's exhaustion, Dorothy's heartbreak, Loretta's hidden child, and Frances's rebellion, we see the real story of Hollywood. It wasn't about fame, it was about survival. Old Hollywood was built on dreams, but it thrived on silence. Behind every glimmering spotlight stood someone paying the price for perfection. Audrey Hepburn carried her trauma behind a smile. Rock Hudson hid his love behind a lie. Jean Peters traded fame for freedom. Judy Garland was destroyed by the same studio that sold her happiness. Dorothy Dandridge opened doors she was never allowed to walk through. Loretta Young buried her truth in shame. And Frances Farmer was punished for simply refusing to obey. These weren't stories of fame. They were stories of survival. The industry didn't just create stars, it created illusions, carefully polished until the pain disappeared. The studios wanted beauty, not honesty. Control, not truth. And when the cameras stopped rolling, the same people who sold perfection turned their backs on the ones who couldn't maintain it. Hollywood called them icons, but they were survivors. People who endured an era where silence was safer than truth. And maybe that's the real tragedy, because their stories remind us that behind every perfect face was a person who just wanted to be free. So the next time you see those black and white smiles, remember, some of them weren't smiling at all. They were enduring. If this story opened your eyes, don't let their truths fade again. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the real Hollywood wasn't made of gold and glitter. It was built on secrets, scars, and stories that deserve to be heard. Every legend has a lie behind it. Let's uncover them, one story at a time.